90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Our guest is Michael Starr. He's an executive coach and also the author of Journey into Peace. And he's going to discuss achieving real success in life and working as a lawyer or as a client with legal battles or in life. So with a message for all of us. Mike, welcome to Law You Should Know. It's very tough out there being a lawyer, and hopefully you can give us some advice and make it easier for lawyers to help their clients and easier for clients to survive their legal problems and challenges. Why you wrote the book, Journey into Peace, and how it can be of help to lawyers and others.
25 years ago, I experienced some pretty significant family tragedies, and also at the same time some professional challenges that were exceptionally difficult. And that began me on a quest to determine how could we reduce suffering and conflict amongst people within our lives and achieve more harmony, peace of mind, and realistic and sustainable results. And I've been looking for 25 years, and I think I found the answer.
And hopefully our listeners and our lawyers out there and the clients can benefit from those ideas. I know one of the things you feel is a good idea to leave people in a better place is aligning our convictions with our behavior. And why is this so important? And what are some ways that lawyers and others can try to do it?
In my coaching, I work with clients for a variety of reasons to achieve financial, relationship, career improvements. And one of the things that's instrumental and has been very helpful is to work with them. It usually takes a couple of months to get clear about what they really believe is right and wrong in life. And I call these the 10 convictions, which is a play on the 10 commandments. And by being clear about what our convictions are, and I do demand or expect that one of them will definitely be about being our word, and another one has to do with having empathy. When we have clarity about our convictions, we avoid cognitive dissonance, where we do one thing and it's in conflict with what we know in our heart of hearts is really important.
You mentioned that empathy is part of the message. So why is empathy so important?
Well, I'm a sci-fi fan. There's a series called Star Trek: The Next Generation with Jean-Luc Picard as the captain, and one of the nemesis in there were the Borg, and these were these aliens that were in this cube. And at one point in time, one of the phrases that was kind of iconic is resistance is futile. And so often in life, what I see, Ken, with my clients, and I've seen it with my daughter and her co-workers and other lawyers, is there tends to be this resistance to reality and an unwillingness to kind of see it in an objective and dispassionate manner. And so it creates a lot of, I guess, frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment, and mostly a lot of failure. So by having empathy for people, I have a term called the natural order of things. We realize, or we come to believe, that it was inevitable that people became the way they did, that events were inevitable to become as they had become. And so where that leaves us is in a dispassionate place of objective, I guess, observation. And then it's a matter of deciding what's the wise thing to do and setting boundaries with dispassionate consequences in dealing with things that we find either toxic or untenable.
As an extension of that, one of your ideas is that self-care, mental and physical, is so important, and finding a way to deal with anxiety and high stress levels. Why is that so important for lawyers and other professionals? And what are some simple ways they can try to do that?
I think it's really essential in an intense profession like lawyers because from what I know about lawyers, there's a need at times to really do your research, and a lot of times it just falls on your shoulders, and there's a lot of pressure on you to figure out what's the best thing to do at the time. And I think they're probably as susceptible as any profession, not more, in terms of stress and anxiety. And one way to kind of mitigate that, and I found this part of my journey into peace was learning about Al-Anon. I'm an active member of Al-Anon, which is a support group for families of alcoholics. I'm also actively involved in NAMI, which is a National Alliance of Mental Illness, and I have a lot of personal, unfortunate experiences in that regard. And one of the sort of the core tenets of in both of those arenas is self-care, is take care of you. In my coaching clients, we have Mike Starr's rule number one, which is take care of yourself physically, mentally, and if you're so inclined, spiritually. Because if you're not strong, if you're not healthy, if you're not optimistic, if you're not excited and having adventures, and I love to have adventures like climbing Kilimanjaro or canoeing from Pittsburgh to New Orleans, if you don't have that, you really don't have an exciting and quality life, and it can be drudgery. It could be very, very difficult. So it adds quality of life, spice of life, and you can be in a position to lift others up. I mean, what do lawyers do? Lawyers often are there to help others. So if you can help yourself, keep yourself healthy and strong, motivated, optimistic, you're a better support for your clients.
And as you mentioned about lawyers helping each other, if you see a colleague, a lawyer, a client, maybe an adversary, they seem to, let's say have some difficulties coping or meeting challenges, is it a good idea to reach out to them to at least listen to their concerns, try to get them to a better place, give them a chance to take advantage of services that may be out there rather than ignoring what's going on?
Oh, yes, Ken, and you said the operative word. The operative word is listening, but in my journey into peace, it's about linguistics and that fact that words have self-fulfilling prophecies embedded within them that can spiral us up, down, or have us go round and round and go nowhere. I use a term called relationship listening. The power of effective listening is it's huge. I have just finished doing a book study, which I've led, called I Am Not Sick, I Don't Need Help, by Javier Amador, and it's about his dealing in the psychotherapy world with schizophrenics, but also applies to bipolar and addicts. And the core of his LEAP method, where the L stands for listening and E for empathy, is reflective listening and letting people know, I hear you, I acknowledge your right to feel the way you do feel, and I can see why you feel that way. And when people get that, it acts in and of itself is a huge healing experience. So yeah, if you can listen reflectively, or I call relationship listening, I call it be the student or be the empowering mirror, you could actually help someone heal themselves.
So it's important to be non-judgmental. It's important to let them talk and you be the listener, and to the extent you can, just accept them as they are, unless it's some dire situation where you feel they need a little guidance or other help, and maybe they need to be referred to someone else who can provide more help to them.
I agree. I mean, it's all about, as Amador would say in his book, you're listening to build a relationship. You're listening to build trust and connection. And when someone trusts you, and when someone feels comfortable with you, and when someone feels heard by you, they're open to suggestions and ideas and a bit of guidance. And if you use the concept of Newt, the natural order things, they couldn't help being who they became, that the circumstances were inevitable, then there's nothing to judge. It just was expected to be the way it is. And now you're in a position to perhaps create a little bit of an intervention through guided listening.
And they're going to probably feel better just unburdening themselves to some extent. And perhaps you're going to provide support for them or get them to a place of a support for them.
I agree. I think it's both unburdening themselves, which we would call venting. There's
Venting,
like a pressure
yes.
within us,
Right.
venting. But I think there's also a level that I would call being acknowledged. Amador is really big about, finding areas for agreement where you agree with them and partner with them. People are desperate now, probably more than in my lifetime, and I'm 73 years old. They're desperate to be acknowledged and heard, and for someone to say, I can see why you feel that way. If I was in your position, I would feel the very same way. So it's venting, but it's also acknowledging their right to feel and view things as the way they do.
I just want to remind our listeners that we're talking with Michael Starr. He's an executive coach and the author of Journey into Peace. And along the lines of and you're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College. If you missed any portion of this show or you want to tell someone else about it, just go to nccradio.org. And when you're listening, you basically want to accept what they're saying, just be a listener, perhaps give them a tiny bit of objective feedback if that's appropriate. And maybe there's some issues you can listen and kind of accept them, but you agree to disagree. Like you don't have to agree on what the favorite color is or what the healthiest food is.
You do. You have to be, in our current environment, which is part of the reason I've written the book, is an antidote to some of the divisive and what I call tyrannical language that's taking place now. Is there's a tendency to see things in conflict, but to try to find a kind of a harmonious view that says, you have a right to feel the way you do. I understand that you feel the way you do feel. And then that tends to open up the door where we can give them perhaps a little bit of guidance and a little bit of advice. But now they're open to it because they trust you. And like the old saying is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So if you show you care about them and their concerns, they'll be open to maybe a little bit of guidance to kind of move them on a path that's a little bit healthier than the one they're on right now. People are desperate for it, I think.
And they'll be a better friend, a better colleague, a better employee if you do give them that support and the freedom to vent a little bit, but support for who they are and what they do.
Oh, yeah. And, you hit another just fabulous word, I think. I love this word, friend, is to be their friend. We talked earlier about the convictions and the alignment of our convictions with our behavior so we don't have cognitive dissonance and we're not believing one thing and doing another. But at the heart of that is we have to like ourselves. A lot of people will say things like, well, love yourself, like some kind of manifestation that you can do. But to like yourself, you have to be your own friend. And to be your own friend, you have to like the way you behave. So if your behavior is in alignment, with your convictions, you can grow to like yourself. And you can use that same kind of, direction or view with other people and become their friend. Because what do we want from friends? We want someone who cares about us, who hears us, who's there when we need them, and someone we can count on. And we don't need judgment or don't need, as someone said in an Al-Anon meeting I attended yesterday, we don't need a lot of Dr. Phils around us telling us what to do. We really want to be heard and acknowledged.
And sometimes they need someone to help explore their options with, should they do this or that, and what maybe you can get some feedback on what the pros and cons might be of each option.
When we can speak in a safe place, I think it expands our thinking. The mind can go 1,000 miles an hour in a lot of different directions. And I think in Eastern philosophy, they call it the monkey mind, where it's jumping around from one thought to the other. When we speak, we slow down our thinking. And if we're good listeners, reflective listeners, relationship listeners, we could ask the right questions. I call it be the empowering mirror. That's part of my languaging, is these states of being. So when we're being the empowering mirror, we're reflecting back not just the words we hear, but the body language that we see and the underlying message that we hear, but we reflect it back in an empowering way and say things like, I see you're concerned about ABC. What do you see are your options here? What are the things you think that might be helpful for you to address this? And so it's kind of like in two minds to think through a problem, but it does begin with the empathy and the trust.
And in a law firm, sometimes you're working on a project. It could be a trial, written papers, and maybe there are different ways to approach it. So if someone feels comfortable coming to you, or you feel comfortable going to someone to discuss different options and tones and a process, there's going to be a better product that results.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I ran a $100 million a year production line. And in 2 years, we improved the productivity, which productivity at 10% a year is quite good. We improved the productivity 60%, Ken, in 2 years. And I attribute the majority of that success to my simple, I call it the magic question that I'd ask employees. We had employee meetings once a week, which is part of the 3 sacred habits that I encourage. We had the employee meetings with certain key employees in the work groups, which in this case was 150 people in several work groups. And I asked them that magic question. And that question led to over 300 issues being resolved in 2 years. And so that question was, how can I make your job easier? And by making their job easier, we reduced injuries. We improved productivity, we reduced waste, we improved quality, and we improved employee engagement. So when we talk with employees and ask them questions you can go up to employee and say, hey, how can we be more productive? And you get kind of like so much of buy-in. But if someone comes up to you and says, hey, how can I make your job easier? It's kind of like, whoa, sit down. You got an hour or two? I have a lot of thoughts.
And what if you rephrased it, especially in a law firm, is how can we be more supportive to you? That could be in the office or outside office or with any challenges you have?
I think that would be in alignment with making your job easier, or being more supportive to you. And, what do you need in terms of support, which could be technical, it could be administrative, it could be communications or clarity, it could be consistency.
Or time off.
Was that
a time, an extra day, or maybe there's something you want to fit into your week.
Or flexible time.
Flexible.
Yeah, and
a little flexibility might go a long way.
Exactly.
I also want to touch on business ethics. Is it good to ask a colleague or supervisor if something is ethical or appropriate, or if you see something that you're concerned about, how can you say something to that other person?
I think that's probably a difficult situation, depending on whether they're a peer or a boss. I think that's kind of tough. My attitude is that I've lived a life of integrity. There's mistakes I've made in terms of maybe being somewhat insensitive to people, maybe not asking enough of their input, but I've never done anything that was where I would stand on somebody else's body to advance myself, or do something that was so-called against the law, against the community standards.
Oh, no, it wouldn't be against the law. I'm just saying maybe you have a mentor or colleague in the law firm. There are also ethics committees out there that will give you, in various jurisdictions, that will give you an ethics opinion about the best process, or whether some behavior is okay or it's not.
Well, I think that it goes back to building relationships. It goes back to listening. It goes back to trust. And if you have a meaningful and healthy relationship with someone, that they'll be open. And I feel we have an obligation to say it in a nice way, a kind way, a respectful way. I dealt with a client who was having an affair with someone, and I said, you're going down a road that's going to create a lot of issues for you and your family. I think you might want to be really careful about that. And I felt compelled to tell him that, even at the possibility that he would no longer want to be my client. And so, whether it's something like, you know, sexual improprieties, not being proper, or even drug use, I mean, it's just the real world. People are using cocaine. Cocaine's getting laced with fentanyl. People are involved in a lot of, inappropriate, I guess, substance abuse, or alcoholism is pretty significant in a lot of professions. Say, hey, I'm concerned about you drinking. I really think it might be something you want to think about. I think we have an obligation to say it in a nice and kind way without badgering them, but to do it privately and in a way that they know it's very, very confidential.
And you mean well. Does the golden rule still apply in some of these situations?
I got to tell you, Ken, I really don't like the golden rule. I like the platinum rule. I'm an anomaly in life. I for some reason or another, maybe it's my parents and the fact that my dad was, had to take care of his family. His dad died in the great influenza epidemic. He ended up landing on Normandy Beach as the medic on D-Day. My mother had to flee World War II communism and ended up in a Nazi labor camp. And, for all those reasons, I guess I've just come to the attitude of, I'm going to do the right thing. We're going to kind of do the best I can with what I got, and, be ethical, be proper, and, kind of encourage people to do the same.
And just to refresh us, what's the platinum rule?
The platinum rule is treat people the way they want to be treated. And the problem that I had in life is I always wanted people to give me feedback on how to be better. I loved being better. That's just like my addiction. And so when I grew up, I thought other people wanted to hear the same thing. I thought they wanted feedback on how they could be better, but in most cases they didn't. And so it did not serve me well.
And that's why it's good to ask them how you can be of help to them, because you want, so they can tell you what they need rather than you assuming it's the same thing you need.
Right. The platinum rule is treat people the way they want to be treated. And as difficult as it is in this day and age to understand ourselves, it's even more challenging to try to understand others. But I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said, I spend 2/3 of my time thinking about my audience and what they want to hear, and I spend 1/3 of my time talking about what I want to say. And I think the platinum rule really goes in line with that. What do they want to, how do they listen? What are they looking for? What their interests? Because if you take care of your employees, if you take care of your clients, if you take care of the community around you, they're going to take care of you.
And that's probably a good way to address client needs as well. I just remind our listeners, we're talking with Michael Starr. He's an executive coach and also the author of Journey into Peace. If you missed any portion of the program or you want to tell someone else about it, just go to the website, nccradio.org, and you are listening to Law You Should Know here on WHPC 90.3 FM, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. Michael, tell us about where our listeners can find out more about your book and also your ideas, your website.
Yes, sir. The book's on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle or in paperback. It's called Journey into Peace, A Language for Peace, Progress, and Healing by Michael M. Starr. And I have a website called Executive Coaching Services. It's www.executivecoachingservices.net. And you can see a little bit about my philosophy, a lot about my background, about my canoe trips and my Jack Kerouac time through Mexico and Guatemala. So there's a lot about me and how my approach towards coaching and achieving results. My main philosophy is that a goal should be a destination plus a journey. It should be an enjoyable journey and a meaningful destination. so that we don't end up one day saying, I've climbed the ladder of success, only reached the top and find my ladder is against the wrong wall. What we want to say is, I reached the top and I've enjoyed the journey along the way.
Okay, and very briefly, if you can just talk about your suggestions on setting and maintaining boundaries.
Begins with empathy and understanding why someone is the way they are and the situations are they are. And then you have to get clear about the boundaries. What is my boundary? Don't set too many, but give it a lot of thought and contemplation. Maybe journal, what is my boundary? What really is toxic? And then every time your boundary is infringed upon, it's non-negotiable. You implement your dispassionate consequences. It may be walking away from something, it may be standing up to something, but I call it the EBC symbiotic 3: empathy, boundaries, and consequences. Get clear about those boundaries, write them out, think them through, don't have too many. But when someone is crossing them or getting ready to cross them, you should have thought out consequences that are done without anger. I call it be the umbrella opener. If it's raining outside, we just open up the umbrella. We don't get mad at the sky. We don't get angry. We just open the umbrella. That's our boundary against the rain.
And if an employer or a client or a colleague is about to overstep those boundaries, what is a polite way to say that?
It's not so much about what you say to them. It's very much about what you do. A lot of people think that boundaries are something you tell somebody and they obey. It's not telling somebody something they obey. Boundaries is what you do when something is out of line. So you decide to say, oh, excuse me, I've got something else to do. Or you decide to not even interact with them. I have an individual that I thought was a good acquaintance, and I saw their behavior was very inappropriate. I just quietly stepped away from them. So I would say, don't worry about correcting them. Don't worry about them obeying your boundaries. I say your boundaries and your consequences are about what you're going to do when you're up against something that you find toxic or unacceptable.
So it's about ending the conversation and leaving.
Perhaps that may be part of it. That may be exactly the right thing to do. Or just not having that person be a client, or not having that, not engaging in that, interaction in the future. And this is another case where resistance is futile. If you think you're going to keep reminding people about what your boundary is, and they're going to obey, you're going to be very frustrated and disappointed. But what you can do is say, every time this boundary is being approached, I've got a plan of action, and that makes us bulletproof.
Okay, I'd like to thank Michael Starr for being our guest on Law You Should Know. And if you want to hear the program or recommend it to someone else, go to nccradio.org, and please join us next week at this same time for another program on Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC.